Welcome to the Ed Bargy video series, Proper Front Brake Application Part 2. In Part 1, we explored the proper braking techniques for aggressive braking while maintaining good control. In this video, we will be exploring the proper ways to improve your braking efficiency before the turning point. These steps must be accomplished and mastered before even trying any attempt into trail braking. Let's set up our scenario. We will be using a simple standard generic 90-degree turn for this example. The braking markers are shown arbitrarily labeled as X, Y, and Z. We will assume that the subject rider has already accomplished the proper braking techniques for aggressive front braking, as discussed in Part 1. We will assume that the rider has chosen his braking marker for this turn and is able to get down to the desired cornering speed within the braking zone, shown here in red. Let's look at the sequence of events. At some point just before his braking marker, he will smoothly roll off the throttle. Now, at the actual braking marker, the rider will then start his progressive braking technique. If the rider is efficient and reasonably aggressive on the brakes, the bike will slow down to the proper speed for the corner in a fairly short distance. The rider will then release his brakes. Once again, this braking distance is what's shown in red. But here's where most newbie riders fall short. The most common problem is that most new riders are not aware of the actual release point. This is the problem. If you're not aware of where you're doing something, you won't be able to make a change in where you're doing something. At the risk of digressing from topic, I need to mention an old racing adage here that I often use in my classroom. And that is, if you are not scaring yourself every corner, then you are not going fast enough. Within reason, this holds some validity. When a rider is releasing his brakes early, what he is actually doing is subconsciously getting comfortable with his entry speed. And this is usually done well before he even needs to start his turn. What the rider needs to do to improve is first, take note and be aware of his release point, because this early release results in an area between the release point and the turning point, shown in dotted yellow here, where the rider is not on the gas and not on the brakes. This is an area of coasting and is wasting time. This is one of the most common shortcomings of new riders, not being aware. They must be aware before they can improve. So the first goal for a new rider is to get rid of this coasting distance. In this scenario, the rider has the bike slowed down enough for the turn in the braking distance shown. So he doesn't need to work on higher cornering speed yet. The object now is not to change how aggressive he is braking, but to move the current braking distance. An example I often use is, imagine it is a 60-mile-an-hour corner, and the rider has successfully slowed down to 60 miles an hour in the distance shown and is now coasting. Then in theory, since he's already down to speed for the corner at his release point, would it be possible for the rider to be down to 60 miles an hour just as he gets to the turning point and eliminate the coasting? And the answer is yes. This is the first goal for new riders. Long before worrying about trail braking, he needs to get rid of the coasting. So how does one accomplish this? Well, that's easy. Simply move your braking marker and brake later. But that is easier said than done. For example, you could just determine that you are, say, coasting for 50 feet. Then the next lap, wait 50 feet longer before you apply the brakes. Simple. Yes. No. Think of what I've always said about making any changes on the controls of the bike. Do I say make big and abrupt, or make smooth, small, incremental steps? The same holds here. Small baby steps, small incremental changes, a few feet at a time. Because if you try to eliminate this coasting distance in one big step, this thing called human nature will come into play and rear its ugly head. For example, if you try to do this in one step, what will happen is when you're about, say, 5, 10, maybe 15 feet before the turning point, you will be traveling faster at that point of the track than you have ever been there before. Now, a panic can easily set in your mind and you will think, oh my God, I'm too fast. Now, you will, because of this panic, not be able to start your turn on time, and you will either run off the end of the straightaway or overbrake and lock up the front tire. Neither one is a good scenario. So far we have discussed what needs to be done. Now let's look at the process to get it done. The process to improve braking efficiency is actually a fairly simple process. Once the rider is aware of his release point, he will now see where he needs to improve to get faster. The first step is to go a couple of feet past your original braking point before applying the brakes. And I mean a couple of feet, not 10, 20, 30 or more, just a couple. Now, in order to keep the braking distance the same amount, the rider will release the brakes a little bit later, about the same amount that he went deeper into the corner. Once the rider feels confident at this point, he can now repeat the step and brake and release a couple of feet further again. The rider will now repeat these steps as often as needed to reach the goal. In this way, the rider is slowly and in a controlled manner getting his release point closer and closer to the turning point. Here's an important note to remember. By only changing a couple of feet at a time, the rider will be building confidence in his tires, in his brakes, and most of all, in himself, that as he gets closer and closer to the turning point, he will know that the bike will be slowed down enough for the turn. And the other thing to remember, small incremental steps. That's the key. One more thing to remember, and there's always one more thing, right? And that is, don't get impatient. This process may take a whole track day of practice to accomplish this for maybe one or two turns. But as you get more and more experience, this process will go faster. So to summarize, this, like we do with every other control, small incremental increases until you work up to your final goal. This way you will build confidence in yourself and your machine that you can get the job done without panicking. Well, we're not quite done yet. Besides reducing the time wasted while coasting, there is another major benefit from this procedure, and that is shown here in this figure. If you can brake later and still be slowed down for the turn, then you can stay on the gas for a few seconds longer, i.e. more throttle time. And throttle time is always our number one goal to improving lap times. The trick is to be the first one on the gas and the last one off the gas. He who has the throttle open the most wins. And this technique helps the rider be on the gas a little longer. Final note. Now, riders can get to this point of their riding skills and stop there and not progress any farther. They can come to track days or even do some amateur racing, meet some neat characters, make new friends, have a lot of fun for many years. But they'll never win anything. Riders will still need to push the envelope a little farther to go faster. But this is optional, depending on what the rider wants out of the sport. So, ride for the fun of it, because if it isn't fun, why bother? So in closing, come on out to the track. For track days, maybe a little racing here and there. Keep pushing your skill level sets as far as you want until you get to your happy place. Then you can stop progressing at that point and just come and have a lot of fun. Because even an okay day at the racetrack is still better than a good day at work. Come on out. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it has shed a little light on some riding techniques for you.